So this is a big list. I'm going to do my best to go through them all. I only have so much time, so we're going to see what we can do. First, let's talk about how the knowledge of astrology came to be. This is in both camps, Western and Vedic. It's kind of like this. Did we notice the signs in the sky and say that that's what astrology is? Or, is that where we get our knowledge from? Or did it come from our intuition of the metaphysical precepts of astrology from within ourselves? This is something that I kind of want to talk a little bit about here. Essentially, the roots of Vedic gnosis, as I like to say it. Vedic self-realization, which is, of course, a cosmic consciousness that includes not only what's happening to us internally, but also what's happening out in the sky. We all know that astrology works. So if astrology works out there, it must also be working within us. Back in the day, when people didn't have telescopes, most of this knowledge would have came from observing what's happening within. And that's what I'm talking about here. Vedic astrology, with all its scriptures, it's based on thousands of years of scripture that came from these rishis. Rishi means seer. It's these people who were so clairvoyant within themselves that they could see the internal, evolving astral spheres working within themselves, even more primarily than what they saw in the sky. So, how did the rishis, thousands of years ago, discover the knowledge of astrology? They had what we called clairvoyance, and they might have even channeled this wisdom from beings in other worlds at the time. Another theory is that life was much simpler at the time of these rishis, and those sages who meditated and attained samadhi, the highest progression of meditative discipline that you can do. Such rishis who obtained samadhi, they had such a stillness of their minds that the clouds of the subconscious were cleared so that they could accurately envision what's happening in their own psyche. We all have this clairvoyance potentially within us, but there's too much karma, too much stuff, too much impure stuff coming through our karmas that we don't have the same clairvoyance that these rishis did. So these rishis would have uncovered through meditation that they are one with the cosmos, including the planets and all the stars, and they got it from within. By looking within themselves, they could see the workings of karma and the workings of the planets. In modern days, we use telescopes to build a horoscope, and then we look at the external cosmos of the planets and the stars, and then we say, yes, I feel like that. I look at that external cosmic thing of the sun is in Leo. I feel like a Leo, right? Perhaps in ancient times, the great rishis went the opposite way. They had clairvoyant soul vision from within, and then they would look out at the stars and say, oh, look, the sun is in Leo. That's what I thought I was, because they look within themselves. They feel, if they're a Leo sun or whatever, they see it, and then they say, oh, look, the sun happened to have been in the sky when I was born. That confirms my internal vision. So they saw that nature and the planets followed the cosmic laws of consciousness that they experienced within themselves. It's interesting to note that, the Sanskrit alphabet of ancient Vedic literature and consciousness, they had an alphabet that's called Sanskrit. And some people say that this Sanskrit alphabet is more discovered and channeled than created. They say that it was discovered as if they were blowing the dust off a book that was already there. Now, this is an interesting thing to think about. It makes us wonder, it happens to be the case that in Sanskrit, the whole language and the alphabet is built up from the cosmos. It's actually a beautiful thing, where they have, for example, vowels and vowel tones and bij seed mantras that actually resonate with the planets. You know, I believe that they've got like hum is like a bottom, and then they've got yum, and then they've got ram for the chakras, and the chakras resonate with the planets, as we're going to talk about. So they fit, it seems as if they fit the language to our galaxy. But the question is, you know, did they fit the Sanskrit vocabulary to fit the stars that they saw out there? Or is there something more synchronous going on? Really, which means to say is that maybe it's possible that the nature of the galaxy that we are born into is an almost like a perfect design that was bound to happen. It's possible that humans, in order to be what we are, because we know that the head relates with Aries, the throat relates with Taurus and Venus, the arms relate with Gemini, the heart with Cancer, the solar plexus with Leo, Virgo with digestion, Libra with the kidneys, Scorpio with the genitals. There's a human that is implied, there's a human design that's implied prior to the phenomenon of our cosmos that we know. So, it seems as possible that the Sanskrit, which anticipated that the planets would be this way, was again something channeled, something that was already there. Now, this is one of the reasons that theistic practitioners refer to the unfoldment of consciousness as a sort of design by a creator. It seems to have a designedness to it, although atheists can appreciate it as a cosmic inevitability. It's like, you know, the universe just spins and spins and spins because time is infinite until, look at this, it's a miracle that we have a planet that's this close, this far away from the sun so that it can perfectly support life, and that it also has these planets that resonate with our chakras. Seems like a miracle, but what else would there be? We need to conceive of time going by moment to moment. So it's bound to happen that a cosmos somewhere in time would reflect planets that have vessels which can express the karma that is unique to the inherent human design. And this is how the rishis understood it. No coincidence, all the designed dream of Vishnu. So, no matter how you dice it or slice it, consciousness, as we all know, all traditions of astrology agree that my consciousness is a microcosm of the macrocosm of all the planets and stars. So Vedic astrology was born from this gnosis, the idea that they could look within and see it all playing out through astrology. Now, in the West is the same. The West had rishis, but Vedic is the term for rishi, but the West had their seers too, who also channeled the information in the same way. Now, much has changed since the days of the rishis. Nobody has that clairvoyance anymore because we're in a different age. It's a different time. Technology and things have grown novelty and interest that has taken us out of our bodies and out of our internal perception. So what happened is that the people who listened to the rishis, for a long time, they just repeated what the rishis said. And eventually it became like a game of telephone. You know, this like something we did in elementary school, where you look to the person on your left and you whisper a word. You know, let's say you whisper dandy. And then the person whispers it to the person on the left, and they thought they heard candy. And then they whisper it to the person on their left, and that they thought they heard candle. And by the end, it comes back to you, and it's like weasel, and it's something completely different from the word that you originally said. So, in the same way, you know, this is how a lot of the astrology, really of all traditions today, are quite confounded, because there's been this game of telephone going on. And there's a lot of humming and hawing about how much distortion has come through the Vedic community. We like to talk about it, we like to admit it, and we like to conceive of astrology as this moving progression of scientific inquiry that builds on itself the more practitioners come through time. So, there's lots of, and especially in Vedic astrology, there are a lot of culturally outdated things, especially because Indian culture, unfortunately, and it's a funny thing, Indian culture took on the theism of astrology and they included their superstition in it, and some things are locked into Indian history and culture where astrology is really supposed to be a moving and breathing thing. Many things culturally have become attached that are now considered outdated, but the Indian culture still holds on to them. It's one of the difficult aspects of Indian astrology. But those who have been studying it and keeping up with it and watching people on YouTube, there's many people discerning what is good from what we've held on to and what is chaff. So, again, it's the same thing in the West. Each of these cultural traditions, the Vedic and the Western, have applied the science of astrology over time, and certain things have for sure stuck. Of all the many things that were talked about and passed down and, passed around and tried out, certain things have stayed absolutely clear and true. The deepest things is like, what does the sun mean? No astrology has a problem with what the sun means, what Venus means and is, although there are differences in understanding. Ultimately, the things that could be reliably demonstrated consistently by lay astrologers in each of these traditions ultimately became the standard tools in the toolbox of astrologers in that culture, whether it's Vedic, whether it's Mayan, whether it's Western, whatever. Now, Western astrology's strongest tenets have stood the test of time. And in Indian culture, certain things were focused on while other things were neglected, which were different from what the West emphasized. Now, and our job as modern astrologers taking in all this information is to just do more of this melting pot consciousness. What is it that ought to be absorbed into a all culturally inclusive astrology gnosis, and what things are not worth absorbing into ourselves. Ultimately, each of us is our own arbiter for what astrology ought to be at some level. So some things may appear to contradict each other between Western and Vedic. In the modern age, it's good to keep your root, whatever yours is, whether it's Vedic or Western, but be open to how other cultures can make you apply your root in new and open-minded ways. Each of these has something to teach the other, in my opinion. West has much to teach Vedic, and Vedic has much to teach the West. So, I believe that, this video is intended for a Western audience. What can Vedic astrology bring to the West? And that is kind of what I want to be talking about today.